What's going on, guys? It's fight season MMA, and today I want to talk about the UFC White House card that is going down on July 4th, 2026 as the 250th anniversary of the United States independence. This card is going down on the White House lawn. Donald J. Trump, the president of the United States, already came out and talked about of how he is working with Dana White to make this fight happen on the card for the American people. Now, I just want to kind of talk about why this is such a monumental card, what I do think the main card is going to look like, and of how that I think this is going to be one of the most incredible cards in UFC history. If you enjoy the UFC content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. We're getting back to daily videos or videos every so often on this channel. If you guys enjoy the UFC content, please drop comments down below talking about what videos I should make, what you guys are interested in seeing, and truly what you guys want to envision for this channel in the future. But let's jump right into the video talking about the UFC White House card in 2026, July 4th. So talking about the UFC White House card, it is absolutely incredible what is going to go down. First off, Dana White has said multiple times that he does not like to have these fights outdoors. That's why he hasn't wanted to go to South Africa for Dricus du Plessis. That is why he hasn't wanted to go to Spain for Ilia Topuria. These reasons, it's just the environmental factors and everything like that. But when Donald Trump says that something is going to get done, Dana White delivers. This is going to be an absolutely incredible fight on the White House lawn. I'm assuming that there will be no fans in attendance, and this will only be like some sort of pay-per-view depending on what the new agreement is going to be inside the UFC with the branding deals. But Dana White is going to put on an absolute masterful card for UFC White House. And I just want to talk about what I think we should expect for this card. First off, I do think that there is going to be a lot of American fighters on this card. And if you are an American champion, I do believe that you are going to have a shot to fight on this card. I do think that this obviously is going to be one of those things to where it's going to be the American champions on American soil, American Independence Day. Not saying that there aren't going to be other champions defending their belt who are from foreign countries, but this is an American-based card, and the one problem we got here is there aren't that many American champions out there. We got a couple. We got like Merab Dvalishvili, who is obviously Georgian, but reps the American flag as well. We got Kayla Harrison, and on the top of my head, that is it so far. We got some contenders who could possibly become champion, that being like Khalil Roundtree Jr., Sean Brady, some guys like that, Corey Sandhagen, but right now, there aren't that many UFC American fighters who are champions, and truly I do think that this is going to be a very interesting card to go down the line. But let's jump into the main card and break down all these fights that I do think that are going to be. We'll start from the first fight of the main card, the opening fight, then we'll go to the fourth, the featured fight, the co-main event, and the main event of the UFC White House. My first fight on the UFC White House card, I'm going to say Sean Strickland's got to be on this card. Sean Strickland is a man who wears American on his sleeve. He is the absolute definition of your stereotypical American person. He is going to be fighting Reinier de Ridder. Now, I do think that de Ridder might get a title shot prior to this occurring, and I don't know exactly what order, but I do think that him versus Strickland would be a great fight, especially since Strickland hasn't fought since he lost to Dricus back in February. This could be another fight that would happen after Strickland fought someone like Adesanya or something like that for a second time. But I do think that that Sean Strickland versus Reinier de Ridder would be a very interesting fight. You get Sean Strickland, one of the America's favorite fighters, on the American card itself, and put him up against a Dricus-like person in Reinier de Ridder who is taking the UFC over by storm. I just think that this would be an incredible bout. I look at these two fighters and see fireworks that would go off. And for the American people, Sean Strickland's placement on this card is perfect, and it needs to happen. This fight could possibly be for a number one contender fight if Reinier de Ridder hasn't got a title shot quite yet. He could possibly fight the loser of Nasruddin Imavov and Kyle Borralho. He could also fight the loser of Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. And I do think a fight with Strickland makes a lot of sense. And I do think that that could be an absolutely go-to fight to put Sean Strickland on the card, put him up against another top contender in the middleweight division, and genuinely have one of the most exciting fights on the UFC White House card for these two individuals. Now, for the second fight on the UFC White House card, I have this fight being Max Blessed Holloway versus Mauricio Rufy. Mauricio Rufy, part of the Fighting Nerds, one of the best up-and-coming prospects in UFC history, is going to be fighting Benoit Saint-Denis at UFC Paris coming up here very soon. But I do think this could be a possible title eliminator, especially with Max Holloway coming off the win against Dustin Poirier and him being hurt and being able to come back at the end later part of the year. Max Holloway is Hawaiian. That's why I have him on this card. He's one of the best UFC fighters in history. He's genuinely such a good fighter. He's been the UFC featherweight champion for such a long time. He's only lost to the very best. He's lost to Dustin Poirier twice. He's lost to Alexander Volkanovski and guys like that. But I do think that Mauricio Rufy versus Max Holloway would be one of the most electric fights in UFC history. You got Max Holloway, who at 155 is just an absolute monster. That dude is massive up there. And Rufy has just come off this knockout against Bobby Green that he looked like he was a fish out of water, completely, absolutely KO'd out there. And I know that this might not be the star power that everyone knows about, but Mauricio Rufy is one of the most exciting fighters in UFC history. And I am genuinely telling you that because Max Holloway and him would put on an absolute show at the UFC White House event. This fight would be for the BMF title at the White House event. Could possibly also be a #1 contender fight for the UFC lightweight title. And I genuinely think that Rufy's projection to the top is genuinely some of the most impressive that I have ever seen inside the organization. I do think a fight with him and Max Holloway for the UFC BMF title, the first of 4 title fights on this card, would absolutely be insane. As the featured bout on this card, I'm going to have this fight be the second title fight, that being Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes. I think that this fight is very, 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 very impactful inside the UFC women's bantamweight division. Amanda Nunes, widely considered the UFC bantamweight GOAT, is going to be taking on the newly crowned UFC bantamweight champion, that being Kayla Harrison. I do think that there could possibly be a title defense in there prior to this fight occurring for Kayla Harrison, possibly against anyone in the top 5, but I do think that this fight makes way too much sense to be on this card than not. Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes is probably the biggest UFC women's fight of all time. Kayla Harrison is a judo gold medalist. Amanda Nunes is widely considered the UFC's women's UFC fighter GOAT. I think that this is an absolute banger of a fight to have as the featured fight on the UFC White House card. Also, Kayla Harrison, as I established prior in this video, is an American UFC fighter. American women's fighter, champion, has to be on this card. Amanda Nunes, UFC GOAT, has to be on this card. Makes a whole lot of sense. This is going to be Amanda Nunes' first fight back since UFC's 289 in Vancouver, Canada, where she defended her title against Irene Aldana. And I do think that this is going to be a very different fight than that one. I think Kayla Harrison's bigger, better than Irene Aldana, and I do think that Amanda Nunes could have some possible troubles in this bout. And I do think that this is going to be an incredible, incredible, incredible fight between these two women. I do think that this fight deserves to be on the UFC White House card, and I truly think that these two women taking the featured bout on the biggest card of the biggest UFC card of all time, that being this White House card for the UFC Bantamweight Championship in the women's division, and possibly the best UFC's women's fight of all time, is only right. The co-main event of UFC White House, I'm going to have the rematch between Merab Dvalishvili and Umar Nurmagomedov. I do think that this is an absolutely incredible fight. The first one that happened at UFC 311 was a barn burner, one of the best fights in the UFC in recent memory. Merab Dvalishvili, yes, is a Georgian fighter, but he does rep the United States on his shoulder as well, and I do think that him going up against a rematch against Umar Nurmagomedov just makes a lot of sense not to do it. I do think that Merab Dvalishvili, prior to this fight going down, is going to defend against a couple individuals. I do think he's going to defend against Corey Sandhagen and Peter Yan as well. And then I do think that this fight with Umar Nurmagomedov slides right on in as the co-main event of the UFC White House. You got Merab Dvalishvili, who really wasn't known as a fan favorite, is now bursting onto the scene as a fan favorite, finishing Sean O'Malley, styling on Umar Nurmagomedov and beating Sean O'Malley to gain the title. I do think that he is one of the most exciting fighters inside the UFC bantamweight division currently, and honestly in bantamweight history. You look at his personality, his fight style, he's so energetic. He's got so much to bring to the UFC bantamweight division, especially over that second Sean O'Malley win. He looked incredible in that fight. But let's take Umar Nurmagomedov. I think he's going to fight Mario Bautista sometime, maybe UFC Vancouver. That's coming soon. Him possibly get one more fight and then slot right back in for the title. Merab Dvalishvili versus Umar Nurmagomedov, the co-main event of the UFC White House card. for the UFC Bantamweight Championship in the men's division. As the main event of UFC White House, I know a lot of people are going to think John Jones is going to be the main event here. I'm going to have it be Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev for the UFC lightweight title. This fight needs to happen. It's got to happen at some point, and Islam Makhachev is going to probably be fighting Jack Della Maddalena as the headliner of UFC Madison Square Garden in November here. And if he wins that fight, which I think he will, it's a very close fight. If he wins that fight, Ilia Topuria might have one title defense maybe in January. I think this is the fight to have. Biggest fight that you could make in UFC history. Biggest fight that you could have right now. Ilia Topuria is 17-0, was the UFC featherweight champion, knocking out Alexander Volkanovski, defending his belt against Max Holloway, on the process submitting Bryce Mitchell, 5-round decision against Josh Emmett, and some incredible knockouts as well. Islam Makhachev is on the longest win streak in UFC lightweight history right now. He is an absolute menace out there, and he is going up to the UFC welterweight division to challenge for Jack Della Maddalena. But the one thing that isn't sat right with Islam Makhachev is the pound for pound #1 title. He had that fight, he had that title, and it wasn't stripped away from him because he lost. Rather, Ilia Topuria went up and did what pound for pound stands for, won in a different weight class. Do think that this is the biggest fight you could make in UFC history. And I think that this is kind of, even though these aren't American champions, I do think that this is the fight to make on this massive card. You bring two of the most skillful, exciting fighters to the White House, a card that will never be done again, a card that is absolutely incredible, and a card that needs stardom to headline it. Take Islam Makhachev, take Ilia Topuria, slam them two together, and get one of the most incredible bouts in UFC history. I think that this would be the only proper fight to top the UFC White House card. An absolutely incredible stardom of events, and you have the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in UFC history, and an absolutely new global superstar, whoever wins this fight. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please let me know if you think that this card is good at all. First fight opening the main card, I'm going to have Sean Strickland versus Rainier de Ridder as a possible #1 contender bout inside the UFC middleweight division. Second fight on that card, it's going to be Max Holloway versus Mauricio Rufy for the BMF title, as well as a possible #1 contender fight in the UFC lightweight division. Then at next fight, the second title fight on this card and the first official title on this card, we're going to have Kayla Harrison defend against Amanda Nunes in an absolutely incredible bout between these two individual women who are some of the best UFC women's mixed martial artists of all time. Co-main event, Merab Dvalishvili is going to be taking on Umar Nurmagomedov. I think it would be an absolutely star-studded co-main event. I think it would be absolutely incredible to have these two fight. And in the main event, we are going to have Ilia Topuria himself versus Islam Makhachev for the UFC lightweight title. I think that this is the pound-for-pound best fight that you could make inside the UFC. Is an absolutely incredible fight between two of the most skilled UFC fighters ever, honestly, in the organization. If you guys enjoy the UFC content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and please show your support down in the comment section. I'm just getting back on YouTube. Had a couple bumpy patches, but we're keeping going. YouTube videos are coming out regularly at this point, and if you guys want to see different episodes or different content, please drop it down below in the comment section and let me know what you guys have been thinking lately about the UFC landscape. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon with more UFC content and news.